3, 2, 1.
Hi everyone, this is Victoria Wolders, and welcome to another Empathy Tale story. Creating compassion, one story at a time. If you are interested, please reach out to me through my website at mykidslocker.com. You can also listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spreaker. Well, today we are going to be talking about ice dragons. These ice dragons will be a very interesting story because we are going to talk a little bit about how there can be issues with misunderstanding. Also, we're also going to talk about friendship and how building a friendship is very important when you are trying to understand other people's perspectives. In this story, we have three characters that journey to go meet these ice dragons. One of the characters understands why the ice dragons are angry and upset, and that one single character is able to meet them and understand their pain. And through that, a friendship is born. When was the last time when you judged someone? When you thought that maybe that person wasn't a very nice person, but then over time you got to know them and realized that they were a nice person and they were just trying to do the best they can. Sometimes taking time to learn about each other's backstories and learning about why we do what we do actually helps us build connection and relationship. And today we're going to be learning about that. So, episode 36, can you believe it, is called The Ice Dragons. So, if you're comfortable, then I will begin. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the Oak and Eagle Kingdom, in the land of the Northern Eagle, there were very high mountains. These mountains were the Majestic Mountains. There lived in the mountains ice dragons. The ice dragons were beautiful creatures. They had heads of silver. They had scales that looked like armor in the sun. Their eyes were crystal blue. They had long necks and their bodies were large. Their silver plates looked as if they had breastplates all over them. These ice dragons lived in the caves off the Majestic Mountains. And it was frigid cold, often covered in a layer of snow and ice. These ice dragons stayed away from many people. The eldest was named Ice, the second was Mighty, and the third was Crevasse. There was a curse put on these three ice dragons by a wizard. The curse was that they would never sleep. They were saddened by this curse, and all three of them were very angry. They lived a very lonely life because they lived high up on the Majestic Mountains, and often people would avoid them because of their anger. They would forage for food and often eat random plants or animals. Their favorite food was the northern eagles that would soar and sometimes land. They had magical powers. Among the villagers, there were stories of these magical dragons having something very special. They had dragon diamond daggers. The story goes that the dragons were able to claw ice up and pull them out, and then, with their magical breath, breathe life into these large ice pieces. The daggers only were carved by them, and they were brought to life with diamonds, and the diamonds were brought out by the dragon's breath. So once the dragon breathed on the ice, there would be diamonds embedded into these ice daggers. And the ice would turn into crystal. So these dragon diamond daggers were crystal and diamonds. So many dragon diamond daggers were in their cave, and for years they would constantly grab and claw at pieces of large ice, breathe into the ice, and then it would turn into crystal that had diamonds in them. So stories started to form in the land of the Northern Eagle, saying that the ice dragons had diamonds. The village below knew that these magical dragon diamond daggers would give anyone great wealth. There was a village at the very bottom of the majestic mountains in a valley. This was the Valley of Ice Village. The Valley of Ice Village decided to venture out and send their strongest men up to the top of the mountains to meet the three dragons. Before they did that, they called out to everyone in the village, "Who would like to go up to the mountain and gather the dragon diamond daggers? Our village is poor. We need to take them, sell them, so that our village and those that are impoverished will have money to survive and feed their family. Whatever diamonds you bring back, you can have half, and the other half will go to the village." Well, there were 3 young people that decided to take on the challenge. The first was a man that was about 20 years old, and his name was James. He was a very kind and gentle man. He had great leadership skills. He was good at solving riddles, and he was strong. He knew how to use his mind wisely. He also knew how to handle a sword. The second person was a man named Jared. Although he was strong, he had been hurt by many people. He was very angry, and he grew up in a home where his mother and father argued much. He became a very angry man. Although he was strong and had a lot of muscles, he just did not have the empathy, the patience, and the kindness to be able to deal with different people. So many people in the village had difficulty with Jared. And the third was a woman named Sydney, and Sydney was a very strong woman. She was the oldest of 3 children, and she had many skills and talents in archery. She was very talented in her strength, and she could do flips and turns, know how to handle a sword. She knew how to maneuver her body around different objects. She knew that she thought that she would be the best person to get the dragon diamond daggers. So James, Jared, and Sydney packed their bags. They decided to work as a team to go up the mountain and meet the 3 ice dragons. They started to go up the mountain. Jared started to say, "I am the strongest of all you 3. I know these mountains." Sydney said, "Well, you know what? For me, I think I'm the best person because I can do flips and I can move. Who can move swiftly like me?" James didn't say anything because he was a very humble man. He was filled with patience and grace. He was very kind and empathetic. He also knew he was strong, and he didn't need to say anything. They got to the top of the mountain. Just as they were getting into the top of the snow, they saw beautiful meadows of flowers because it was springtime. They started to pick up the flowers. James said, "Well, if we just can get these flowers to be given to the dragons, perhaps they will put them to sleep." Sydney said, "What do you mean, James?" "Well, these special blue flowers that I'm holding in my hand are sleeping flowers. They can be used to help us in our journey." Make sure to pick as many as you can, because we may be able to use these in the future. Jared just laughed. Flowers? We don't need flowers. That's just such a crazy idea. And Sydney looked at him and said, I would rather do flips than pick up flowers. And so both of them walked on by. As for James, he picked up as many blue flowers as he could because he thought he might be able to use them. They kept walking, and they eventually heard the roars of the ice dragons. They came up to these gigantic caves, and they saw the dragon Ice sitting outside the front of the cave. Sydney looked at the two men and said, I can do this. She came up because she thought she would be able to be the one to beat the ice dragon first. She said, Ice, I know who you are. We want the diamonds. Daggers. We want the diamonds and the daggers. The diamonds in the daggers. Frost said, why are you here? This is our home, this is our treasures, and this is something that is very important to us. Sorry, let's repeat that again. Ice said, why are you here? This is our home, these are our treasures, and this is something that is very important to us. These diamond daggers are part of who we are. Sydney said, well, the Valley of Ice Village needs your dragon diamond daggers to sell and to live a prosperous life in the Oak and Eagle Kingdom. There are many people who are poor, and they need to have those daggers. He looked at her and said, do you truly believe that you will be the one that will go forth and get these daggers? Are you going to steal them from us? She looked at Ice and said, yes. The dragon said, if you answer this riddle, I will give you my portion of the daggers. What can you see through a rainbow, yet is as sharp as a sword? She thought, could it be a mirror or a window? Then she looked at the dragon and said, it's either a mirror or a window. Both are sharp, but you can see a rainbow in them and even through them. No, you are wrong. And at that very moment, he reached out his claw and breathed on Sydney. Sydney all of a sudden became a crystal diamond statue, just as the dragon diamond daggers had become. Jared and James watched on, and they were amazed. Sydney now was a diamond statue. How were they going to turn her back? They weren't sure. Ice said, you chose to want the diamonds, and now you are a statue. I don't think you are worthy of my dragon diamond daggers. Just at that point, Jared came out. He said, you don't scare me. You've never scared me. I've heard stories, and I will be your demise. At that time, Ice and Mighty came out of the cave. The dragons both laughed. What are you talking about? Jared in his arrogance said, well, I know that I am so powerful, and I believe that I can get your diamond daggers. Well, said Mighty the dragon, then why don't you answer the riddle? What can you look through and see a rainbow, but it's as sharp as a sword? And at that moment, Jared said, "Well, it must be water." Because when you look through water, you can see a rainbow sometimes, but water can be the sharpest sword because it can cut through rock. At that moment, Mighty said, "You are wrong." The ice dragons, Mighty and Ice, blew their breath on Jared, and he too turned into a diamond statue. The last person was James. James was a very honorable man. He had learned compassion and empathy from his mother and father. He learned all his skills of welding by his father, and he knew how to handle a sword. However, he also had heard stories about how these dragons had been given a curse. James walked out in front of Ice, Mighty, and now the third ice dragon appeared, Crevice. So Ice, Mighty, and Crevice, the three ice dragons, stood large and bold over James. James looked up at them. He said, "I come to give you a gift. I have sleeping flowers. I will give you one each day as a gift for the next month. They will allow you to sleep. We will talk, and I will come to know you. I will stay in your cave, and I will sleep here for a month. You will come to know me, and I will come to know you." The dragons were shocked. They had never heard of anyone wanting to get to know them, and so all three dragons agreed. As the two diamond statues of Sydney and Jared stood there, James took his stuff and moved himself into the cave. Then James began to start a relationship with the three dragons. He would give them the blue flowers, and all three of them would sleep. They hadn't slept in years. And over time, they came to know James. And one day they said, "We see that your heart is good. We see that you will use our dragon diamond daggers for good. Yet, you will need to answer this one riddle. The riddle is, what I can see through, what I can see you through." Okay, let's try that again. What can see through a rainbow, yet is as sharp as a sword? James turned to them and said, "The answer is a diamond." They said, "You are correct." And at that very moment, they bowed down to him and said, "We are now your servants. You now have the power over us, and all the diamond daggers are yours. We will call you our master, and we will be forever indebted to you. You have given us sleep, and you've given us friendship over the last month, and you've come to understand our pain. We will forever be indebted to you because you knew how to solve our pain, but also solve the riddle." James said, "I'm going to take these dragon diamond daggers down to the village, and I will give them to our poor villagers." He said, "I have one last wish that you could help me with. Could you please breathe life back into my friends? They stood here in statues, and I will come to teach them and help them understand that them understanding you and giving you the gift of sleep ultimately helped us in our journey to help our villagers." And at that moment, the three ice dragons walked out of the cave and breathed life back in to the two warriors, Sydney, and Jared. The three dragons breathed, and you could feel the light, gentle breeze over the two warriors. They came back to life. Although they were shocked, Sydney and Jared learned valuable lessons to be humble. And at their feet, there were rocks of diamonds that they could use to help the villagers. Over time, James taught Sydney and Jared what it meant to be friends with the three dragons, and they would often take turns to visit the dragons and give the beautiful blue flowers of sleep. All of them learned about generosity and friendship. As for the Valley of Ice village, they became wealthy, and they were able to sell the dragon diamond daggers and provide for the poor in their family. In the end, everyone learned what it meant to learn about backstories and about the story behind the pain. And thanks to James and his patience and his wisdom, he was able to lead that. The end. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for another Empathy Tale, Creating Compassion, one story at a time. This is Victoria Wolders. This is the story of Ice Dragons. The story was shared in the spring of 2019 with my own kids upstairs in their bedrooms. And I just hope that you can take the story and learn a little bit more about perspective taking and the importance of how James took the time to know what the dragons needed, and in doing so became friends with them. Well, I'm going to sign off now. I hope you, in your life today, will create compassion one story at a time. And I want to thank you so much for listening. Hope to see you soon at another Empathy Tale, Creating Compassion, one story at a time. Thank you.
3, 2, 1, action.